Hello, and welcome to Heart Containers, a daily Nintendo podcast where every Monday through Friday we discuss the latest Nintendo news and various other fun topics. I'm your host, Rami Fawaz, and this is the episode for Thursday, February 21st. We have a couple things that we're going to talk about today, what happened in yesterday's news. First, there is an update to the Scalebound rumor that we have been covering over these past couple of days, but more than just an update on that, there's actually an additional tidbit of information that hints towards the partnership or the future partnership between Nintendo and Microsoft and how that might make things interesting for both of the companies in the near and far future. After that, we're going to go in and talk more about Pokemon 2019 rumors. I know a lot of people were expecting, or at least hoping, that the Direct last week was going to mention Pokemon. We didn't get that, but there are a lot of swirling conversations going around the internet with some new updates that happened yesterday about when we might actually hear about Pokemon 2019. So we're going to cover that in today's show as well. As always, after we go through all the major headlines from the day/days prior, the last bit of the show is dedicated to answering the question of the day. Yesterday, I asked you guys to send in your controversial Nintendo opinions, and so we're going to have a discussion about what those are. Remember, you can easily participate in the question of the day by heading over to heartcontainerspodcast.com/question, and doing so could get your voice represented in a future episode. Now, let's get started with the daily Nintendo report.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS. My body is ready.
We would like to play.
A way to make 3D games a reality.
And it's called the Wii U Gamepad.
The first story that I'm going to talk about is a continuation. It's been a story that we've been covering, like I said earlier, for the last couple of days relating to Scalebound potentially making its way onto the Nintendo Switch. According to Nintendo Insider, they published a report at the end of last week that said that they have sources which led them to believe that Scalebound, the Microsoft first-party exclusive game that got canceled in 2017, was being rebooted and placed onto Nintendo's Switch hardware in some way. Again, that game was made by, or was being worked on by Platinum Games. Now, the news story continues with what happened yesterday by a guy named Liam Robinson. He's a freelance games writer and YouTuber, among other things, and he released a video yesterday on his channel which provided his input on the whole Nintendo canceled game Scalebound situation. Liam has made a name for himself as someone who can dig up ground-level development info for a wealth of content in the past. His channel is actually filled with dozens of editorial-style videos with topics ranging from like the original pitch for Metroid on the Wii U and what went wrong with Mass Effect Andromeda's animation fiasco. He's also written articles on various game scoops in the past, including breaking the rumor last August that new Super Mario Bros. U was making its way onto the Switch. So needless to say, Liam has an ear to the ground about this sort of thing. He does have some sort of credibility. In his latest video that he posted yesterday, he states that the Scalebound rumors circling the internet are not likely accurate, at least not entirely. The decision to cancel the game, now this is what he's saying, was actually a mutual one between both Platinum and Microsoft due to technical constraints of the Xbox hardware, believe it or not. Apparently, the original vision for Scalebound was set to outscope even modern day hardware, which is kind of funny to me because if you think about it, this is before Microsoft was about to unveil their Xbox One X, and they must have believed that Scalebound wouldn't even work on that console, or at least not be optimized well enough on that console, because if they had any hope for it, then they might have held on to that partnership. Liam does not believe the game makes sense to be brought back for the Nintendo Switch because of those reasons. For one thing, it could not run on the Xbox One, so it would definitely have a hard time running on Nintendo's less capable device. It also would not make a lot of sense considering that it was a mutual agreement between these two companies to end development on the title, so it would be a little odd for Platinum to then turn around right away and make this deal with Nintendo immediately afterwards. Liam also mentioned that there are even some legality issues involved with the Scalebound IP, and Microsoft would have to sell it to Nintendo in order for the game to exist on the Switch without drastically changing the base premise. So that's kind of the main update to the Scalebound part, but he actually continued on, and this is, I think, the more interesting portion of the story because we've covered Scalebound to death at this point, and some people are even tired of hearing about it. They just kind of don't believe it, or you believe it, and that's it. But there was an extra tidbit that Liam added at the end of his video. He added one thing where he said that Nintendo, Platinum, and Microsoft, this love triangle, is actually a little bit more interesting than we think it is. Liam claims that he is hearing that Nintendo and Microsoft are supposedly working on big things together, although that's all that he would say on the matter. Now, there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to quickly talk about the Scalebound stuff so that we cover what this update means. If the Nintendo Insider Report still has any hint of truth to it, which it seems like after what we talked about yesterday with JP Kelms, the producer of Scalebound, and today with what Liam is saying, it's becoming less and less likely as the days go by. If there is any truth to it, then it has to probably be the fact that whatever it is that Platinum is working for or with Nintendo on is probably the remnants of Scalebound, or maybe the Scalebound team that broke apart and started a new project that maybe is still set in a fantasy setting. Maybe there are dragons in it, perhaps, but it is not Scalebound because it looks like there are just way too many holes to jump through, way too many hoops to jump through for Scalebound to actually make its way onto the Nintendo Switch. One of them being technical hurdles, as Liam suggests in his video, another being legality issues with intellectual property. So if Nintendo Insider is to be believed, that Scalebound is the canceled game that is being brought to life again for Nintendo, it's not really that accurate in that way because it's not really being brought to life again. It's more like being restarted with a brand new concept and maybe even a new premise. It's probably not even going to be called Scalebound again, if that's true. And I think that's where I'm going to leave the Scalebound stuff. I actually want to dive into what this mysterious relationship between Nintendo and Microsoft looks like that Liam thinks is going to be big. That was his word. It's supposedly working on big things together. I will remind you guys that earlier this month, on February 4th, there was a report that Xbox Live was making its way onto the Nintendo Switch. I pulled a little snippet of that so that I could read it and remind you of what exactly that said. Quote, Xbox Live is about to get much bigger. Xbox Live is expanding from 400 million gaming devices and a reach to over 68 million active players to over 2 billion devices with the release of our new cross-platform XDK. Get a first look at the SDK to enable game developers to connect players between iOS, Android, and Switch, in addition to Xbox, and any game in the Microsoft Store on Windows PCs, end quote. So that was a report where Microsoft was actually preparing the notes for an upcoming presentation for the Game Developers Conference. That's why there are terms like SDK and XDK. SDK means Software Development Kit. It's for developers. It's letting developers know that Xbox Live is coming. So we're going to be talking about that soon and how you can leverage the cross-platformness, I guess, of Xbox Live that's going to be available not only on Xbox consoles, but also on iOS, Android, and now Switch, and how you can improve your games in that way. There was a ton of speculation after this report that came out about like what this could mean. A lot of people said, well, it's probably just going to be as bare bones as possible on your Switch. You can probably just open up your friends list or see your gamer score, maybe even purchase a game on Xbox Live, but it's going to still load on your Xbox One. So that's about it. Other people kind of had more imaginative ways of thinking about this, or I guess you could say more optimistic ways of thinking about this, where they thought that maybe that meant we could stream games to Nintendo Switch, that you could actually play Xbox Live games on your Nintendo Switch. And wouldn't that be an amazing world? So what Liam is saying here is that he's hearing that Microsoft and Nintendo are supposedly working on big things. And I think if I connect the dots here where I put my 2 cents into all of this, is that I think there's a way more validity in this streaming future on Nintendo Switch than maybe many had originally thought earlier. I think with Xbox and Microsoft bringing Xbox Live onto the Nintendo Switch could mean that in the near future, we live in a world where Nintendo does stream Xbox games on their hardware. I don't think that's really that out of the realm of possibility. I think that when you look at the future of where gaming is headed, and how we are headed to a streaming future, like it or not. I mean, there was just that announcement that came out a couple days ago by Google, where Google is now finally ready to talk about what they've been working on. They've been working on some gaming project, no doubt related to streaming, because earlier this year they kind of ran that Google Chrome project where you could actually play Assassin's Creed Odyssey through Google Chrome. You didn't need any specific additional hardware, just a computer that could run Google Chrome and connect with some sort of gamepad. But I assume that you could probably play with a keyboard and mouse as well. And you could play Assassin's Creed Odyssey, AAA third-party game on a lot of people are trying it pretty crappy notebooks and just playing through the Google Chrome web browser. Google is messing around in this space. They want to see how far they can push streaming, and I think Microsoft is in a very similar boat. I think the thing that makes Nintendo so interesting is that with the Switch, they've kind of carved out their own portion of the marketplace that doesn't seem to directly compete with Sony and Microsoft in the ways that Microsoft and Sony compete with each other. You look at the sales week in and week out. You look at the NPD sales, the monthly sales, all the sales data. And my point is, every time you see those sales, it's very clear who's competing with who on a direct way. You know, top of the charts for last month, let's say, Kingdom Hearts 3, PS4. Maybe right under that, Resident Evil 2, PS4. And then you go down, 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 down. Kingdom Hearts 3, Xbox One. Resident Evil 2, Xbox One. It's this fight that goes on between the two, and then in the middle you have Nintendo, which is maybe number 3 or number 4, and it says Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. You know, the game that lives on its island, and that's just because of the Switch and how unique of a hardware it is when you compare it to the other options out there on the market. It has its own little niche. It fits in its own space, and because of that, I think Microsoft sees it as an opportunity to add to their future streaming platform. And that's what I take from all this is that I think it's more likely than not that when they said Xbox Live is coming, that they meant it. That this wasn't a joke. This wasn't a small time thing where, oh, okay, it's only check your friends list or anything like that. No, I really truly believe that if Microsoft is planning a future where you can pull out your phone and continue playing Crackdown 3 or whatever on the go with your phone via streaming, that why wouldn't they also look at the Nintendo Switch as a way to do that? Because it could be a mutually beneficial relationship between both of those companies. Maybe they see each other as just different enough that they can help each other in that way. As a Nintendo fan who isn't necessarily in the Xbox ecosystem, this can put your foot in the Xbox ecosystem. This can be the one step forward that unravels everything else. Maybe you would have never ever bought an Xbox or played any Xbox Live games, but now the Xbox Live is on the Switch, you bought one or two, and maybe it's getting you to think more about Xbox hardware in general. Maybe you like your gamer score. Maybe you like the achievements that you're earning while playing Xbox Live on your Switch, and you decide that the next time you're in a market or in the market for a maybe, standard high-end console for your 4K TV, you decide to go the Xbox route instead of Sony. So you can see how it helps Microsoft in that way, and it should be very obvious how this helps Nintendo. This immediately makes the Switch a ton more appealing for people, not only for Xbox fans who maybe have an Xbox right now and want to be able to play their game on the go. The Switch will easily be the best way to do that from a streaming perspective because it is a tablet that comes with built-in controllers. So yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. But even for people that aren't in the Xbox ecosystem and who don't have a Switch, all of a sudden the gaming library has just exploded with a whole bunch of games. Maybe you can play Halo 5 on your Switch, Crackdown 3 on your Switch. Maybe you can play Rare Replay on your Switch, Banjo-Kazooie. We're going to get into that in a little bit, actually. Okay, for the second story in the report, we're going to dive deep into the rabbit hole for this one. The Pokemon rumor mill has been in full force the last couple of days, and although some of the conversations going around are questionable in their validity, The sheer volume of headlines has led me to finally want to clue you guys in on what could be happening very soon for the franchise. Everything revolves around Pokemon Day, a holiday dedicated to celebrating the anniversary for the release of the original Pokemon games in Japan on February 27th. I've mentioned Pokemon Day in the past when it was originally announced because more so than any year prior, it seems like the Pokemon Company is ramping up the festivities in ways that are actually fairly peculiar. They've already announced a multi-day event at the Nintendo Store in New York where multiple Nintendo Treehouse Q&A sessions will be held, but they have not stated what these Q&A sessions will be about. Now, traditionally, the Treehouse team at Nintendo has showed up after major presentations, like at E3, for example, to take closer looks at recently announced games and answer questions about their gameplay mechanics. Yesterday, the Pokemon Company announced even more activities happening throughout the week, including trade and play stops happening for the Pokemon trading card game, as well as free live streaming for the Pokemon anime on various platforms, including Twitch and Disney XD. In the midst of all of this news, Pokemon fans have been on high alert for anything that might hint towards a Gen 8 announcement happening to correspond with all of the Pokemon Day fun. 2 days ago, Game Freak's director Junichi Masuda posted what seemed like an innocuous screenshot of a Weedle he caught in Pokemon Go, but it has since been microscopically torn apart for clues. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility that Masuda was trying to stir the pot, as he has posted images in the past with hints towards future unannounced Pokemon titles. But because this particular instance could really go either way, I decided not to tell you all about it until today, where we have a whole bunch of Pokemon news to get through all at once. The image shows off a Weedle with 226 candies, 199 CP, and 4.16 kilograms in size. Theory crafters have been quick to point out that 2.26 could actually be a date. 226, which was the candy number, could be the date 2.26, which is February 26, which happens to be the day right before Pokemon Day. As for the 199 and 416, some believe that they are actually Pokédex numbers, with 199 referring to Nidoking and 416 meaning Queen? Must be Queen. I keep wanting to say Vespian Queen, but that's not right. It's Vespi Queen. Two significant Pokemon due to their King and Queen endings, as the current leading rumor on what the next generation of Pokemon games might look like is that it's supposed to be set in England and might be called something like Pokemon King and Queen. I know it's a lot. It was just a picture of a Weedle with a lot of numbers on it, and if you do enough math on any sort of numbers, you can basically make anything happen from whatever. That's why I didn't want to report on it when it made news 2 days ago, but because there's all this Pokemon stuff happening, I'm going to mention it today. And here's the latest thing. Yesterday, there was more fuel added to this fire by Twitter user Mugawus. I think he's just called Mug, but his handle is at Mugawus. Somewhat out of the blue Twitter user who doesn't really have a long-lasting reputation as a Nintendo leaker in the same vein as Emily Rogers or King Zell, but has been dead on about very recent Nintendo announcements, causing the full-on Eye of Sauron to be squarely set on his tweets as of late. Before last week's Direct, he tweeted almost every single game that was going to be announced. And yesterday, he added on to this prediction pile by tweeting out, quote, Pokemon soon, end quote. So there's a lot of scuttlebutt. There's a lot of hubble bubble going around about the Pokemon games in the Pokemon sphere, about what could potentially be happening. No doubt, because everyone knows that there is Pokemon Day coming up very, very soon. And whether it's because there's actual meat to this story or just because someone's trying to capitalize on the fact that there's an event coming in the near future, you have to be the judge on this one. I actually think some of these rumors, although they are making news, are kind of weak. I mean, I already talked about the Weedle image. It could literally be anything at all, but it's also slightly strange for Masuda to be posting a picture of a Weedle. I mean, we are years past the original release date for Pokemon Go, where you could originally catch a Weedle in the first place. So to me, that sounds a little odd. Like, I'm the director at Game Freak. Of course, I've caught a Weedle in the past. It didn't seem like there was anything particularly special about this Weedle that he wanted to show off in any way. It was just, oh, hey, look, I caught a Weedle this morning, and this is the picture of it. So it does strike me odd in that regard. But all of this math and number crunching in order to get certain dates and stuff like that. I mean, I only told you a few of them. The people have dissected that image to death and found out even more things that they seem to be true about it. And I couldn't wrap my head around that sort of thing. And then for this Mugglewuss guy on Twitter saying that there is a Pokemon Direct, yes, he has, or Pokemon news coming soon. Yes, he has a reputation, but also I took a look at his tweets. I examined it. He was right about everything that he said, but at the same time, everything that he posted before the Direct was very vague, like easily fooled or easily tricked in that way. He was not specific nearly enough to the point where I would feel comfortable feeling like he actually knew what he was doing as opposed to riding the rumor wave. An example of that is that he tweeted 2D Zelda. That's what he said. He didn't say Link's Awakening. He said 2D Zelda. I mean, there was already a rumor swirling that 2D Zelda, top-down Zelda, is something that we would see. So for him to say 2D Zelda and not Link's Awakening, it bothers me. It bothers me a little bit. It makes me question the validity of this guy, and that's something that we have to do, because if we don't look into who these people are and whether or not they actually have a reputation, well, we're just going to be chasing every single rumor and every single person who says anything about Nintendo all across the internet. So I am going to preface those two things, is that these rumors are weak. They're weak. So Pokemon Day, it's either going to be very exciting or probably incredibly disappointing, because if these are the things that are making news headlines, then I'm sorry. Like, there's a good chance that Pokemon Day is just going to be a lackluster occasion. It's really just meant to have a good time for anyone who's interested in it, and not going to be an opportunity to announce the next generation of Pokemon. Now it's time to jump into what is my favorite part of the show, the question of the day. So yesterday I asked all of you guys to send in your controversial Nintendo opinions. What are your hot takes? What do you believe about Nintendo that gives you the nasty looks from the majority of Nintendo fans? I did not get any responses. Again, don't worry about it, because I'm going to tell you what my controversial Nintendo opinion is that's going to get me nasty looks, I'm sure, by whoever is going to listen to this podcast. Here's my controversial Nintendo opinion. It's kind of small in scope, but it's still controversial. Banjo-Kazooie is the better 3D N64 era platformer when compared to Super Mario 64. That's right. Stand by it. Banjo-Kazooie is the better game. I believe Banjo-Kazooie was far and ahead of its time in the way that it handled platforming challenges. I thought going into levels and not being kicked out every single time you got a star was the way better way of doing it. It's kind of like the Odyssey way of doing that today, the Super Mario Odyssey, where in Banjo-Kazooie, all the way back then, you could go into a world, you could find a Jiggy, you could find notes, and you would not be kicked out. You wouldn't be forced out, and the world wouldn't change drastically just because you're coming in as if it was a brand new level. I love that. It added an explorative flair to the platforming game in the same way that Odyssey did it years later. But more than that, Banjo-Kazooie actually took it a step further. I think Banjo-Kazooie did things that are even better than what Odyssey does today, because Banjo-Kazooie actually made what you collected kind of worth it, like kind of part of the strategy. For instance, if you went and stayed in a world, in Odyssey, in a kingdom rather, in Odyssey, and you found every single power moon that you possibly could, that really wouldn't help you that much. It could get you to the next stage, and that's pretty much about it. Whereas in Banjo-Kazooie, you can actually strategize that stuff. You can stay in the first place in Mumbo's Mountain, find every single thing that there is to find, then go into the next location, and if you are good enough, if you find enough Jiggies, you can actually skip worlds entirely if you don't want to do them. You can go to other worlds early on. You can kind of decide which Jiggies you want to collect and progress through the actual hub in a way that rewards you for playing the way that you want to play it. And the last thing that I think that Banjo-Kazooie has over Mario or Super Mario 64, besides the fact that the worlds kind of live and breathe and our explorative bases that I don't think I really got out of Super Mario 64, except for the actual hub world, except for Peach's Castle, is the creativity in the level design. I mean, in Banjo-Kazooie, there is an entire level based off of a metallic gigantic shark that lives in swamp water and is chained to the ground. And you have to shoot his golden rotten teeth with eggs so that you could dive into his body and find Jiggies in his mechanical innards. That's a level. That's something that happens. And you have to actually dive deep under a Clanker, that's his name, the shark, to actually let him go free. That's actually part of the game itself. Nuts, nuts. And at the end of the game, there is another level called Click Clock Woods. And that level is actually 4 levels combined into one. It's this idea that every single level is based off of a season, even though it has the same environment. And even if you go in the winter or the summer or the spring, the level design changes based on that season. So you're kind of challenged to go in at one point in time and then return at a different point in time so you can find a Jiggy. I think that was mind-blowing. And because of that, when I think about the N64, Banjo-Kazooie is easily the iconic platformer in my eyes. I do not think Super Mario 64 holds a torch to it. Super Mario 64 is not a bad game, okay? It's not a bad game, but I just think Banjo-Kazooie is better, and if I had a choice to play one, I would play Banjo-Kazooie every single time. That is my controversial Nintendo opinion. Let's get into what tomorrow's question of the day will be. One of the rumors I've heard about this next Pokemon title is that it's going to be a revolutionary step forward for the franchise, that Nintendo wants to do for Pokemon what Breath of the Wild did for Zelda. My question to you guys for tomorrow is, what does a Breath of the Wild Pokemon game look like in your opinion? Is it actually an open world? Is it a multiplayer experience of sorts? What do you envision in your minds when you think of a next generation Pokemon reboot? Again, this is your reminder that you can easily participate in the question of the day by heading over to heartcontainerspodcast.com/question, and doing so could get your voice represented in the next question of the day segment in the next episode. And that's it. That's everything. So if you have any other comments, questions, thoughts, opinions, concerns, or any other reason to reach out to me, you can head back to the website that I've been mentioning already, heartcontainerspodcast.com, or you can reach me personally on my Twitter, where my handle is @RomeFawaz. That's ROMEFAWAZ. This has been Heart Containers for Thursday, February 21st. Thank you so much for joining me, and make sure you guys tune in tomorrow.